Quiznos did everything wrong and absolutely deserved their failure. Known for their signature toasted subs, Quiznos dominated the sandwich industry from the time they opened in 1981 to the mid-2000s. At their peak, they had 4,700 locations, an astonishing number even today. To put their size into perspective, Jersey Mike's and Firehouse Subs today operate a combined 3,100 locations. Quiznos was huge. During their heyday, they made billions in annual revenue and gave Subway a run for their money. Now, that's far from the case. In 2023, Quiznos operates less than 400 locations. From 2007 to now, their business shrunk by 90%. And this collapse is far and away the biggest failure in the history of fast food. The current state of Quiznos is sad. However, with hindsight, it's clear they had a flawed business model from the start. In 1981, business partners Jimmy Lombados and Todd Disner opened the first Quiznos location in Denver, Colorado. But before starting Quiznos, Jimmy and Todd got their start in business when they opened a fine dining Italian restaurant called Footers in 1978. While operating Footers, Jimmy and Todd hatched an idea to start a new restaurant with a whole new concept. Their idea for this new restaurant was similar to that of Footers, yet instead of fine dining, they sought to create an Italian-style deli. In Footers' kitchen, they formulated the brand concept and menu for Quiznos. Using their knowledge of Italian food, they developed a full menu, including submarine sandwiches, soups, salads, and a few pasta dishes. They invented recipes for red wine vinegar dressing and for their trademark soft baguette. Instead of using chopped and formed meats, they opted for quality cuts of whole muscle meat, including capicola and Genoa salami. But most importantly, before adding any vegetables, they toasted the sandwich to melt the cheese and bring out the flavor of the meat and bread. The concept of a toasted sandwich was an immediate hit, and customers fell in love with what at the time was a unique idea. From here, Quiznos began franchising, and that's where the first signs of trouble began to show. By 1991, 10 years after opening the first Quiznos, Jimmy and Todd had a total of 18 locations, each one averaging about $27,000 per month in sales. From the outside looking in, everything looked great, and their future looked bright. However, just below the surface, the business was crumbling. Though Quiznos as a franchise continued to grow, it did so without improvements to individual restaurants, and the product quality at some locations deteriorated. And unfortunately, Jimmy and Todd didn't have the money or expertise to address these issues and were unable to provide support to existing franchisees. So in January 1991, Jimmy and Todd made the difficult decision to sell the company. They sold it to a franchisee named Rick Shadden, who already owned and operated 3 locations with his father, Dick Shadden. By this point, Rick had already been involved with Quiznos for about 4 years. The Shaddens, for better or worse, made Quiznos what it is today. From the get-go, the Shaddens wanted growth, which is of course understandable. However, the issue was how they went about achieving growth. They immediately began building an infrastructure that would promote growth and profit over everything else. Just 2 years after buying the company, they increased their annual sales from $7 million to $8.5 million, and they doubled their locations from 20 to 40. It took Jimmy and Todd 10 years to reach 18 locations, and the Shaddens more than doubled this in 2 years. Encouraged by their immediate success, the Shaddens took Quiznos public in 1994, raising $4.4 million for the company. The following year, in 1995, Quiznos opened their 100th store, and by 1997, they became the number 3 sandwich franchisor in the world, just behind Blimpie and then Subway. From here, they continued ramping up the rate they opened new restaurants until they reached a staggering 1,000 locations by the year 2000. Once again, from the outside looking in, things looked fantastic. Franchisees were seemingly making money and had little to complain about. But that was all about to change. because unfortunately at this point, Quiznos made the awful decision to form a subsidiary, also known as a company owned and controlled by them, called American Food Distributors. Franchisees had no choice but to buy their food and paper products through this company, and all the products were allegedly marked up so high it became near impossible to turn a profit. And the Shaddens did nothing to alleviate this problem for franchisees. They did the exact opposite. At some point along their business journey, the Shadden family realized they could make way more money selling supplies to franchisees via American Food Distributors than they could earning royalties. According to an article by Wolf of Franchises, in peak years, American Food Distributors made $200 million in revenue, while royalty revenue was roughly $70 million. And all the profits made from this allowed for even more growth, because between 2002 to 2004, Quiznos ballooned from 1,700 locations to 3,300 locations. Around the mid-2000s, franchise owners began voicing their concerns when national promotions mandated they offer low prices, but they had to pay above-market prices for their supplies. Franchisees became fed up with not making enough profits and started suing Quiznos. One lawsuit cites a memorandum drafted by a Quiznos lawyer in 2003 that stated, 40% of Quiznos units are not breaking even, a fact that prospective franchisees say they were never told. Franchise owners felt scammed when their franchises weren't performing the way they had hoped. They felt like Quiznos took advantage of them. You also have stories of people like Elisa Whitehall, who say that 3 years after handing over her check for the licensing fee, she had yet to open a Quiznos in the location she bought, and Quiznos refuses to return her $25,000 licensing fee. According to a lawsuit, from 2003 to 2005, Quiznos collected about $7 million in fees from the 350 franchising licenses that it sold but never found locations for. In 2005, to add insult to injury, Subway launched 2 fatal attacks on Quiznos. Number 1, they added toasters to all of their locations, and number 2, they kicked off their $5 footlong promotion. Now, Quiznos had no unique marketing angle for their sandwiches and thousands of locations that were bleeding money. On top of this, Subway's marketing was phenomenal, and Quiznos was not. Even though Subway's mascot Jared aged poorly and sucks, it was nonetheless a successful campaign that shaped everyone's perception of Subway. Subway had Jared, and Quiznos had sponge monkeys. And it only gets worse from here on out. In 2006, in a leveraged buyout, Quiznos further sealed their fate when they sold 49% of the company to a private equity firm called CCMP Capital Advisors. This leveraged buyout left Quiznos with hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, on top of every other hardship currently going on in the company. But oddly enough, their massive debt paled in comparison to what happened next. In 2007, Quiznos hit their peak at 4,700 locations. But unfortunately, that same year, they also hit their peak number of franchisees suing them. This article by Janet Sparks further illuminates the situation. Quiznos encountered a franchisee revolt so vast that it has been forced to settle, following years of litigation brought by literally thousands of its franchise owner-operators. Last Friday, Judge Rebecca R. Pallmeyer filed an order and dismissal in federal court that brings a close to the lawsuit. The deal promises to provide over $206 million to Quiznos sub-sandwich shop owners and to the system as a whole. After the lawsuits, which prompted many franchisees to close their doors, Quiznos encountered the Great Recession of 2008. With stores already struggling, the recession was effectively the final nail in their coffin. From 2008 to 2012, Quiznos closed over 2,000 stores. If you do the math, that's over 1 store closure every day for 4 years. As more stores closed, the system they built began to crumble and weaken. Fewer stores meant less revenue from franchisees going to their marketing budget, which meant less eyes on their products overall. they were growing weaker each day, losing stores, losing money, losing everything. Finally, in 2014, after putting it off for as long as possible, Quiznos filed for bankruptcy on March 14th, 2014. They reported $875 million in loan obligations. 2015 was truly the beginning of the end. At this point, they had less than 700 stores open, with more to close in the future. However, that same year, they launched a grill concept as part of their turnaround plan. This turnaround plan and grill concept failed within a year, and franchisees continued to lose money and close more stores. 3 years later, in 2018, a private equity firm called High Bluff Partners, for some reason, purchased Quiznos. Quiznos is an iconic brand with room for growth, Jerry Lopez, High Bluff operating partner, said in a statement. "We are excited about the acquisition." Well, it's been 5 years since High Bluff Partners purchased Quiznos, and about the only thing that's changed is they have about 40 less locations now. As of right now, Quiznos has 176 US locations and 183 international locations. It's possible that in our lifetime, we'll see this restaurant go completely extinct. And it's sad because, unlike Subway, people never complained about the quality of Quiznos food. Quiznos didn't fail because people hated their food. They failed because the people in charge couldn't care less about the health and well-being of their franchisees. Over time, they began to see and treat them as customers. They became a glorified, expensive food distributor, and for that, they paid the ultimate price. They're basically gone now. The closest one to me is over 2 hours away, and I can only imagine that distance will grow further and further over time. But what do you think? Will Quiznos ever make any kind of meaningful comeback in the near future, or are they doomed to suffer a slow and painful extinction? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Also, I know it's been a while since my last video, and I just wanted to say, I'm back. Let's do this. In all seriousness though, thank you so much for watching.